In today's tutorial, we're going to look at VAPPs at TUDublin, in particular using CX Designer and CX Programmer, so you can remotely program your PLC for your assignments. So we'll go into Google and we type VAPPs, DIT, and it comes up here and tells me it's got hosted apps at VAPPs DIT. So the first thing we need to do is we need to make sure we've installed the Citrix software. So for Windows, we download the Citrix software and we install it. I've already done it on this PC. If you're having issues with this, just check that you don't have ad blocker running or you're not using Ghosty or one of these to block JavaScript. Make sure they're disabled. So assuming that's installed, I can come along and I go to vappsdit.ie and I enter my student number and my password and click log on. So as that loads, we get two options. We get our favorites and we get apps. So we're going to select apps, and you can see here that we've got a number of different options. The two that we're interested in is the CX Designer, which is there, and the CX Programmer. So let's just have a quick look at the CX Programmer. So double click to launch it and you get a dialog here that asks you to open the CX launcher or the Citrix launcher. And that will now open up the software. This can take a little bit of time on some computers, so just be patient. So now it's opening up the CX Programmer, and now I have a window which is exactly the same as you'd see in the lab. So I can close down this dialog and I can just use. So in CX Programmer, we're going to select File and we're going to select New. And from the drop down box for device type, the PLC we're going to work with is the CJ2M, and we're going to select network type of Ethernet IP. We're then going to select settings and we're going to change the IP address to 192.168.1.1. If you're in the lab, you need to select the right IP address, but because we're just running this as a simulation, we can just use .1.1. So I'm going to click OK, and I'm going to click OK again, and this should launch a empty project for me. The project by default is ladder logic. So we have our ladder logic here, and we have our symbols where we can enter our symbols, and we have our section 1, which is the default section for putting our ladder into. The second one down here is this end section. If you do not have this, you will not be able to run your ladder. It will just run the once, so don't delete that. So we'll go into section and we'll put in a quick bit of ladder. So let's just go for input working bit 1. So I'm going to use working bit 1. I'm going to click OK. It's going to ask me for a comment. I'm going to go with that. And working bit 1 is going to turn on output 1.01. Okay. And there you go. That's my entire code. So I want to check, does that work? So I'll go to simulate. And I'm going to go with work with online simulator. This allows you to simulate the actual program that you're debugging in real time. So the CX simulator runs, and you can see here now that it's uploading it, and it now says that the program is running. So you can see there that the little green line is on and it's waiting for me to do something. At the moment, I don't have anything to actually do here because I have no inputs, and because I don't have access to the physical test system, I don't have push buttons that I can press, or I don't have anything. So let's create a little HMI to run this code. I'm going to go back into Citrix and I'm going to select CX Designer this time, and I'm going to open that. Again, I'm going to click OK, and I'm going to wait for this to open. CX Designer splash screen comes up and it loads away. Okay, so this time I'm going to go File and I'm going to go New. From the drop down list here, we have a number of different possibilities. The one that we have in the lab is the NS5 TQ1 V2. So I'm going to select that, and I'm going to leave the system version as 8, and I'm just going to put in my project name, test HMI. And I can leave the file name as test HMI as well. Okay, so I'm going to go OK on that, and that is going to create my first project. It asks me, do I want to add a screen? And by default, I'll just say yes. And my screen number is going to be 0. Okay, so that's configured, and I've got my first screen here. The first thing we need to do before we continue is come along to Systems and configure this HMI to work with the HMI we have in the lab. So I'm going to come along and I'm going to go to COM settings, and the first thing I'm going to do is go to serial, and I'm going to delete the serial. We don't use the serial connection on the back of the HMI, we use Ethernet IP to connect to our PLC. So to do that, I'm going to go to Ethernet and I'm going to enable my Ethernet. Now my Ethernet here has 3 bits of information I need to fill in: the network address, the node address, and the IP address. This is the network address, node address, and IP address of the HMI. In our case, we're going to go with 1 and 2, and we're going to use 192.168.1.2. Remember, in the lab, the IP address is 1 greater than the IP address of the PLC. That's the sticker that's on the front of the box. So we've done that, and now we've configured our Ethernet for the HMI. We want the HMI to connect to our PLC, so I'm going to add a host. So I say add host. In this case, we have a number of different options of how our host can communicate with our PLC. The default is FINS, which is a Omron protocol. We don't want to use that. Again, we want to use Ethernet IP. And our Ethernet IP address for our PLC is 192.168.1.1, which is what we set up when we created our CX programmer. And we're just going to rename this from host 3 to PLC, just to make it a little bit easier and more obvious. And I'm going to go OK. Okay, so that's my basic PLC setup using CX programmer, and I now got a basic CX designer with a HMI with a blank screen. So let's just add something to that, and what I'm going to add is a button, a simple on-off button. There you go. And I'm going to double click on that, and I can see here that I have a number of selections. Now I'll click cancel for 1 second, and I'm going to come along here and go to common settings, and I'm going to select symbol table. These are all the symbols that are available to the HMI. At the moment, the only symbols available have been auto-generated by the HMI itself. So we need to come along and we need to add symbols from our CX programmer. So in CX programmer, it's still running in the online simulator. So I'm going to click simulate and work offline. And that brings me back offline, just as you would do in the lab. Now, if you want to use this in the lab, we use Control W to go online or Control W to go offline. In the simulator, it's Control Shift W. So let's just look here. I just typed in W.0.01. So instead of that, I'm going to create a symbol for that work bit, and I'm going to go insert symbol, and I'm going to call this HMI test button. Okay, and I'm going to give it an address of W1. So it's now comes along here, and I can see here that it's filled that in, HMI underscore test PB, and I now have a symbol for that same amount. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to copy that one using Control C, and I'm going to copy that into my symbol table for my CX designer or my HMI. So copy it across. As you can see now, it says, do you want to copy this in for host PLC? If you see serial up there, it means you have not configured the host properly. If you do that, you will not be able to configure it later, or you can, but it takes a bit of, it's a little bit difficult. It's much better to just start right the first time. I will have put this templates up onto Brightspace for doing this if you need them. So we're going to go OK. And now you can see that HMI test button is a Boolean and it's been added to my symbol list. So I'm going to select my push button and I'm going to use the address that I want to go high when I press this push button. And I'm going to click set. So I have a number of options here. I have the two auto-generated and I also have this HMI test push button. Well, that's the one that we set up, so that's the one I'm going to use. If you don't see this list, you need to click on the list button up the top here. You have two other options. You can actually create these separately by just selecting the right memory area and putting in the work bit and the bit that you want to use. The word, I should say, and the work bit. Okay, so we're going to go to list, select that, and we click OK. And we click OK. So now that button has now been assigned to that particular address within our simulator. So I'm going to come along here and I'm going to click test, and this will allow me to simulate my HMI and my CX programmer at the same time. Our tools, test, and say yes, I want to save everything. I get three options here. The only two options that we're really concerned about are connect to CX simulator and connect to PLC. Well, if we're working from home, we don't have the PLC, but if we're in the lab, we do. So if you're at home, you're going to connect to CX simulator. If you're in the lab, you're going to connect to the PLC itself. So let's connect to the CX simulator and let's select start. Okay, so now you can see here, it's come along and it's actually opening up the simulator and it's gone online in the CX programmer and my CX designer is starting up. So my CX designer will start up a simulated screen with my button on it. So when I click my button, you can see now it has gone green. So now we've connected the button and we've successfully tested it, and this output is going to go high. So to end this, we come along and we just close this. We say yes, we want to close the test session. And now CX Designer is available again, but CX Programmer will remain online, so you need to go work online simulator, which will take it back offline. So that's the end of the first tutorial. It's a very short tutorial on how you can configure a simple project.